Good evening, everybody. We are trying to get the space up and running. The spaces are a bit, let's say, wobbly today. Maybe it's because it's the great patriotic victory day today, and the EU chose to seize the earnings from their frozen Russian assets on Victory Day. It's quite childish, actually, I would say, but that's just me. Good evening, everybody. I hope that you are all okay, that everything is fine where you are, that everybody is safe and sound. And a special welcome to our great co-hosts and co-hosts to this evening. We have the secretary hosting, and Tisha will be co-hosting, and we have the prominent and excellent speaker, Mr. John Matthews. Welcome, John. Is everything okay?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, everything's going great. Just trying to gear up for bringing people in and trying to settle the minds because as the world collapses and we're we're trying to get them in, a lot of frantic natures happening. So trying to ease some people out there.
Yeah. It is the paradigm shift is over us. It is what it is. You cannot. It's gonna happen either way. The dollar's gonna die. The paradigm shift is gonna be towards the east. We have today, if somebody our great listeners have missed it, today is the Victory Day, the great patriotic day for the Russians and for the Allies as well, actually. So this is the day when the fall of Berlin was stipulated, so to speak, or conducted. This was the end of that. We will not go there today, but we were on the Colonel's space, Colonel Townes. And she's all over IG Farben and all this now, so it's kind of interesting, actually. So I think we are getting there. I think we are getting there. We have so many great people listening in and trying to use the past to see the future, and to understand where we are, why we are where we are, and why we are doing this. Because this is what we are doing is like, you have to be really, really, really stupid, and you have to be really, really convinced that the way forward is to give a perspective, create critical thinking amongst the ones that wants to listen. And the pushback on this, I can assure you guys, in the root country of the Third Reich project, and everything starts somewhere. The eugenics and, well, the first central bank in the world as well. That's we're going to talk about today. So in 1668, a few years after that, a guy called Axel Oxenstierna, he was maybe the top player ever in the ranks of the oligarchy. He had sort of conquered Europe. He had the German nobilities, the blue bloods, the the counts and the countesses, and he had them running after his carriage when he entered the premises of the Cardinal Richelieu in the 1600s. In the 1700s, in the beginning of the 1700th century. There was a long war in Europe, a 30-year war, which he conducted. We get back to that. And they won. And the purpose of it was to create national states. This is when this concept actually started to grow. And also to implement the right people at the banking in this, because mechanical occupation would not be, it would be a bad affair. And he was a businessman, one of the greatest businessmen. He was a true oligarch. Maybe really you could actually say he was the first oligarch of the oligarchs of the modern kind, which still is the, let's say, the role model for these guys. So he had the conquered Germans, the blue bloods, the countesses, the running after his carriage. Possibly barefoot, I don't know. Maybe they kept the shoes, I don't know. When he entered the premises of and the Cardinal Richelieu, which was the power of France. France was not really involved in they were involved in the 30-year war, but they were sort of getting along with Oxenstierna and called the second, which Carolus II, which was the warrior king, the Lion of Sweden, the one that is still on the shields and on the flags of the Ukrainian Nazis. Believe it or not, but that's the way it goes. It's blue and yellow. The Kiev is blue and yellow. Has never been anything else but blue and yellow since the Vikings. So we have them running after his carriage, and Richelieu meets him on the stairs to his, rather pompous residence. He's the head of the church. He's not the king. He's the head of the church. But at that point in time, he was the power of that region. So this is the kind of guy who sets up the plan for the world's first central bank and the world's first fiat currencies as well. This is the guy. This is the sort of the ground zero. So this is 1668. And in the meantime, in the year of 1600, our dear Elizabeth I, a very, very smart, I would say, skilled, knowledgeable, and also a proud Viking heritage. She's straight on heritage to Richard of Normandy, or Rollo, as he is called. He is the Viking, let's call it, he's Viking 101. He's he gets Normandy. He pressures and the French king in the 900s and so on. He gets what he wants, and he makes sure that his relatives and his friendly Vikings also gets to the task. He is the father of William the Longsword, and a couple of generations down, this William the Conqueror, the one that sets, probably from the grand plan that they had, he sets out this kind of strange thing which we call City of London. And that is a square mile by a square mile. And believe it or not, in 1694, the world's second central bank is formed within inside those Viking square mile by square mile. And besides of that, it's a kind of strange legal realm there, as we talked about in the last space, and that goes these days also for Sweden, Switzerland, the Vatican, of course, since the get-go. Actually, the Vatican went into that state after the Vikings in 1052, just 2 decades approximately before the Vikings retook the British Islands. They kidnapped the Pope, and before that we had Tisha's relatives. Tisha's heritage were occupying, keeping Rome under siege for many years.
The Vikings.
The Longobards. The one that
Lombardi.
Yeah, the ones that invented the word bank. The banksters, the original banksters, gangsters. Oh, they were Viking in Venice. Oh,
Wait. The Vikings, they started the first bank. Am I correct?
Well, when they started to call it a bank, but yeah, you could say so. The banking era, when banking went into banking, so to speak, to bank, the word we talked about. That is in Venice, in Lombardy, Italy. That is when it sort of modernizes itself a bit. And you just need to check a map, then you will see that Venice is strategically very important. That's the way it goes. It's not more complicated than that. So we have the framework here. Okay, the Vikings, they were sort of occupying Europe, all the waterways and so on. Rollo makes his deal with the French king, gets his princess, and takes control over the English Channel, which was critical for shipping. So, and it just moves along. And suddenly, in the year of 1600, his heritage says, let's go for Viking expansion, whatever. Same tactics, same everything. The East India Company is signed on. Year 1600 by Elizabeth I. And just shortly after that, she goes out of history, leaves the throne. And in 1670, there is a rather strange thing happening, because we have Axel Oxenstierna fighting in Europe, winning it. Stockholm, Sweden. In 1670, just 2 years after that, the world's first central bank is formed. Charles II grants the East India Company the ability to mint money. And this is please remember this. They already have the doctrine of discovery. They are, getting into this with the maritime law, how to use it a little bit, but that is something that hits us later on. With actually, there will be a first for that as well, because the first time they started to numbering people was in the Third Reich project, which is as I say it's a common project between the US and the Swedish oligarchy that is into the eugenics. That's sort of the base case, because they have that in common. And of course, they are bankers or banksters as well. So the first time the maritime law is applied to people, sort of, to human beings, in that sense, moving out of the sea and into land, it is when you start to give people numbers, and that is in the camps in Nazi Germany. And believe it or not, in 1947, the first country in the world that starts to give their people numbers instead of being a living soul is, of course, Sweden. And from that day, it's just downhill. Bretton Woods is in place. We start to get numbers. We have the fertilizer in place, mass production of fertilizer, which is the Swedish/Norwegian, which is same actually.
Matt, can I add something real quick?
Yes.
And so also in 1947, shortly after Sweden adopted the numbering system, what took place was the National Security Act, which then on the Western Hemisphere put all of both Canada and the United States of America and the top part, I believe Mexico, into a numbering system using what we have now as the area code.
Yeah. And then it didn't take I think in 52, something like that, you started numbering people as well. That was already done, the numbering system the telephone system was very developed in the Nordic countries, a long time before the States and so on. That's where that is actually where Tolkien got the Sauron's eye from. He is actually using a silhouette of the let's call it the telegraphic tower in Stockholm before they had to dig the lines into the ground instead. There were lines everywhere, but you have this big tower, and in the middle of the tower you had a clock sitting, a really big one, symbolically enough. This is just a side note. This is really strange. Just a couple of weeks ago, all the clocks had their pointers removed in Stockholm for maintenance or whatever. They were removed, all of them. I think they still are removed, including this big one. That clock, when they dismantled this telegraphic tower in the 60s, something like that, whatever. No, earlier. I can't remember exactly. It doesn't really matter. But this clock was moved then to another place. It's like 9 meters in diameter or something like that. A big iron chunk, more or less. But for some reason, all the iconic places where you have these watches on the main buildings, on the castle and on the Reichstag, I almost said, on the parliament buildings and so on. They removed the pointers, and nobody knows why. They just removed them in Stockholm, which is of course a small town, 1 million or so with surroundings, but they are also the first and the founder of this 15-minute cities stuff as well. So you get it. It's coming from there. So anyways, let's go back to where we were. Sorry, derailed myself there. I'm good at that. I'm derailing myself. Tisha, you have to tell me when I'm derailing myself. You have to say, "Oh no,
Yes,
you're
sir.
now."
I'll be on top of it, Mr.
Yeah,
Mott.
thank you. I'm derailing. It's not so good actually, but yeah. Anyways, so we have to be able to have success with the East India Company and the Sweden's conquering of Europe. You have to have arms, you have to have military, you have to have knowledge, you have to have that's a lot of things that gonna go into place at the same time. So the basis of this is also the start of the military industrial complex. If we look at the East India Company, they use for warships, they use the Dutch design of the Flying Dutch ships. They had a really good design, built in Holland, of course, and also in their own wharves of the East India Company in London. This is really important, and of course they need materials. They need to be secured. They need to be, you have to seal them and so on. That is a good old Viking product from the north of Sweden, where you have the tar. That's one of the main export products for like many, many, many years, together with the iron, of course. But the tar is really important, and it's only actually the Nordic, the way up north, that are manufacturing those, that have the knowledge how to do a good tar that will keep the boats rocking, so to speak, or floating, or being sufficient. They have their own military academies. They have their own naval academies. They have their own, everything. It's a closed loop system. The intelligence service, as we know it today, is starting to grow here with the East India Company. This is the first times that you have some industrial espionage and so on, which is, you have always had this, but not organized, where you have, okay, we have a department here. It's prior to these times, it was not so, let's call it organized. It was organized before that. All kings and queens and whatever, they have always needed their hand, the hidden hand, which is that, they can't translate to the Secret Service. But organized in large scale, because the East India Company grows very quickly to 260,000 soldiers and 100, 150, 200. The numbers vary a little bit in the sources, of the finest warships at that point in time. And they are invincible. There is no country that can withstand these people if they want to, nobody has an army like that or a navy like that. And it's a private company with the ability to mint money, granted by Charles II and the Pope and everybody. Everybody's in on it, just as they have been up to now. That's sort of 400 years later. They've been scamming us for 400 years, and it's the same people, same families almost. It shifts a little bit here and there, but in the mains of it, all of the families that were running the opium trade for China through the East India Company to Russell and Company. And I know that the secretary is moving in all of this information up in the top now, so in the Jumbotron, because we don't have a bubble today. So if you want to write something, you DM the secretary or Tisha, or you jump into the to the X post of the space and put your information underneath there. So we have a situation where we rather easily actually can identify the players, the families that will move the East India Company into a powerhouse, which is the powerhouse that the founding fathers are rejecting. They know that that is the problem. They actually, I would assume that they are not so worried about the English. They are worried about the English crown, but they often is misinterpreted that it's the crown. No, it's not the crown. It's the East India Company mainly. The crown is, of course, in on it, so you could say that they are one and the same, but legally they are not. And that will end up later on with Woodrow Wilson and all of this. So what is happening with the East? But now it's up and rolling. They are putting territories under them, especially the opium trade for China. That's the main thing, but they are everywhere. And they are doing exactly the same as the Vikings did with their ships and their skills in Europe. They are just expanding it on the map to be a global operation. This is a global operation, and we are just entering the 1800th century. And it's global. They have the communications, they have the intelligence service, they have the wharves, they have the education. They are doing it by the book, and it's Viking style, 101. It's same tactics. It's just modernized a bit. So what is happening in the 1800th century in the US? Mr. Matthews?
Sorry, 1 second. I was putting together a post. Well, the interesting thing that I wanted to touch on too is the Canton system that took place, and I mean that goes that essentially it started mid 1700s, so like 1760 through pretty much the end of the East India Company as what we know to be for trade, right, or what they call trade, because at that point they had already established the monopoly, right, and so in 1760 there was this sort of it was called it was the Chinese history that really brought together the East India Company, which already at that point had the monopoly on the British trade with China, its Canton system. And so that really was the public-private partnership to begin with at its inception point of the conglomeracy of the crown back in the 1700s, and this is prior to the United States signing its independence. So they already had, the eastern part of the world already, confined and part of that monopoly because they knew the power that they could wield over the control of that, which then, led into Robert Clive, who was the British colonial administrator, and which was part of, the merchants and the merchants tailors School of London, and so he was real, big part of what you referred to as the French East India Company. So there was a lot of moving parts even at that time, and it's pretty wild to see looking back how much territory and area, like physical land area, they were able to cover with communications. I feel like we almost overlook that, and it gets overshadowed sometimes because even though they may have been just using horse and carriage for delivery purposes of articles and mailings. I mean, they were efficient at it, and they were very, very good at using, well, I call them their carrier pigeons, but essentially they had their merchants, which they would relay messages to throughout different sectors, and they would have this in their districts. And so this is how they would, very, very quickly move information through these areas. But they always had overwatchers and overseers to make sure that their systems were not only put into play, but they were running smoothly as well, because the money obviously had to go back to the crown.
They grabbed the informational advantage, and they have not let it go until internet. Internet is a two-edged sword. I think they were gambling on that one. They could not. I think this is speculative. Note that, but I think they have not been able to foresee the dynamics of the internet and the way that people are communicating and doing what we are doing. Oh, we lost Tisha. She dropped. Oh no. Let's hope that the space is not. Oh, Tisha is back. Speaker. Yes. Good. Let's bring her up as a host again. Anyways, the information is the key. And the lengths that the oligarchy have gone to keep the informational advantage and control over the media, it's astonishing when you look at it. You will actually, if you when you really sit down and start looking at it on the long perspective, you will actually you will be falling off the chair, because it is astonishing. They have gone from the pigeons, actually the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds' only advantage was the pigeons. That's what was made their fortune when they were gambling. They were putting out a lie and about the war, early war, and they gained their fortune to their informational advantage at that point in time. And this
Yeah, you're
one,
spot on, Matt. I mean, you control the narrative, you control the minds of the people, right? And
yeah,
that's no different then than it is today.
yeah, no, same. And you also control the stock market. I think everybody have seen, or at least touched the movie where you have the counteractors against Nasdaq, meaning Wallenbergs, the Ericsson company, the ABB, the Nasdaq, the Westinghouse, which is ABB Atom, Hitachi still is, and they were so skilled, the generation of Wallenbergs, on this information. They had foreseen this, so they went out of. They almost ruined themselves on that. Actually, but anyways, they were and still could have been, but are not. I think the generation now has, played along with and throwing the sub oligarchs under the bus since mid 90s, I would say. But anyways, that doesn't really matter. It's not what we are talking about today. So the rapid development of information transfer will be controlled by the oligarchs, meaning the Wallenbergs, the Rockefellers, the Schiffs, the Morgans, and all of this. But especially the Wallenbergs, they are really skilled at this with the telephones and so on. We know that Graham Bell invented the telephone, but the telegraph was already up and running. And in between there, we had a Pony Express, of course, faster the delivery of this. We had the printing press, are of course, already invented in the mid 1500s and so on. But the manufacturing of paper will be critical, and that is, a Nordic, a Wallenberg thing. The paper mills will pop up. The oligarchs will keep them under control. If you want to have a newspaper, you need paper to print it on. And if you control the newspaper then you can also control the newspapers. We have seen that several times during history that the oligarchs will blackmail newspapers that wants to, be critical of the main agenda that they have. Information, control of information, and control over the means for information of the public, and then you can control the public. Of course, the East India Company stands from 1600 to 1874. So the reason for pulling it out is that it's getting too expensive to mechanically occupy a country. And also the plan for the First World War is already set at the point when they sort of delete it and morph it into the nefarious IG Farben Third Reich project, which starts way before the First World War. The First World War is just a stepping stone. The sacrifice of 20 plus million people is just a stepping stone to get the League of Nations, the Bank for International Settlements, and so on up and running. It's just a stepping stone.
And Matt, I want to add too, we can't forget about the role that on an international level, the bar played into this, because they wrote all of the language used for these monopolies, therefore protecting them, right? And the bar essentially had control, as they do now to this very day, both on the American bar and the International Bar Association. They had control of the media. So
Yes.
it went from a people's press, free press, to the media, and that is what essentially has been re-weaponized, not weaponized as in brand new, because obviously there is nothing new when it comes to control of the minds. The narrative shifted, and going back to what you were saying before of the lightning speed, I don't know that they thought that we would get to the depth that we did, right? And I believe this is one of the things that they really hate about Trump because of the declass that took place. The depth of information at the highest levels of security that he wasn't even necessarily privy to, right, was released because of all of the collective efforts. Not only did Trump play his part in the grand scheme of things of declassifying information, but this was a collective effort. We have collectively international allies, right? We have an ally, just they simply refer to themselves as the Allies. And these are international efforts that have been taking place over the last 30 some years, right? And so this declass of information then went to the highest levels of the NSA and security intelligence agencies, all of your alphabet soups. So we really got to the core root of a lot of these issues.
Yeah. The Russians have done the same. They are opening up their archives. They are writing new history books for the kids in school and so on. So they are sort of a little bit ahead. They also reformed their banking system. So it's we are moving in a well. It's kind of a really fast moving but in slow motion train crash. So we are moving towards it, but
It's
as I
like
said,
the freeze scenes in the Matrix.
yeah. It actually is. It is amazing. There are still some question marks. Don't take anything for granted. We are not eating popcorn here. We are not sitting back and watching a movie. No, we are watching theatrical efforts, and we are watching sometimes people that we think are the bad guys that really maybe have to be bad guys to infiltrate the bad guys. It is hard to tell with all the players that are involved, but over the inside the oligarchy, there are not so many. The sub oligarchs, they are many. The sub oligarchs, they are many, and the useful idiots, they are, or well, let's call them educated. The sub oligarchs are educated criminals. That's what we could call them. Playing theater, but they often don't have the full picture. Not all of them, and so therefore we are seeing some strange moves on the chessboard being made. Talking about strange moves, we have the resistance to the banking, the resistance to the East India Company, which is sort of connected to the banking. We have a resistance to the bar, to the legal, and now we are at around 1700, late 60s. The resistance is starting to grow within the United States of America, because there are so many people that have left that knows about the 30-year war. They know about Oxenstierna. They know about the banking. This is not far away from these people. This is not far away. They for sure are very, very aware of the East India Company and the kind of strange tariffs and and this leads up to let's say the Tea Party movement. John, I will leave that to you to take us to 1775.
Sure. And at this time, so here we have Washington. He's such a huge uh, player on fronts. And when I'm bringing forth this information, keep in mind I'm not creating a bias. I don't have one. I'm just bringing forth the information of what took place. So it's not me coming forth saying I believe that everything they did was good or bad, here nor there. It was very pivotal of what he did, George Washington specifically, because he essentially created the initial, what we know to be the Secret Service. And so he actually had his initial intelligence sector started. You got to remember, a lot of these people who came over knew about all of the things we're speaking of. They were right in the middle of it. And I mean, this is 100 years. What we're at 100 years prior to the dissolve of the East India Company. And let's see, what year did that take place? Essentially, it was
74. They dissolved.
1874, right? So now, I mean,
and of course, John, that is to the point that in 1871, the US was hijacked. So just to make that clear, this is and then they did not really need the East India Company. It played out its role, so to speak, and the morphing will come into what will be the First and the Second World War. But let's stick to the 1770 Washington. Things are moving. The criticism is growing. The awareness of what and there is, at this moment in time, there still is just a couple of central banks, just a couple in Sweden and in England, and there are some banks connected to this that East India had pushed out in the territories that they have conquered and so on. The nefarious banks that will be central banks and big players, they are already in place at this point in time. At least let's say the founding of them is done. They are in place. They will change name and so on and so on, and then some of them will become private banks. Some of them will become central banks. It's but at this moment in time, prior to the 1776 revolution, there are only 5, not even that, I guess. Top maximum 5 central banks existing as such. So please remember that. Jon, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, that it all has such a, I mean, it's so tied in and it's so intertwined. It's unbelievable sometimes. In this, I mean, fast forward to even the modern day Tea Party of things, it's closer to home than you could ever imagine, especially with what I've found over the last few years with my family and the tide of things. It's pretty dumbfounding. But let's go back. So now we're at 1773, and the colonists, who completely and just blatantly objected to the British taxation without representation. So they started demonstrated by dumping the tea taken from dock ships in the harbor. And essentially, I mean, that was the resistance as we knew it in the foundational elements of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and the freedom and true declaration with the American Revolution, which gave birth to what we know as the American independence. And so, with that Tea Party, it really stood as two things. So it was kind of a background term used. There was no real formed party association like Republican or Democrat, because we were establishing what was known to be a Republican form of government regardless. And so because that republic in its formation was already on the brinks of being worked out, this Tea Party was really kind of a movement. If you think of like a modern or an early day movement to the people just standing up for their rights and fighting back, and that's where really it was developed into the saying no taxation without representation. And so then fast forward to modern day times, we have in reference to the Boston Tea Party especially, where the tax protest held in the 90s, and actually even before that in 1984, going back to that fantastic year, and the tie-in to a couple of people, David Koch and Charles Koch of Koch Industries. They founded the organization, which is Citizens for Sound Economy, the CSE, which was, I guess, a modern day conservative political group. And their mission was to fight for regulation and less lower and non-existent taxes. Especially taxing just the corporations and companies that were involved with the federal trade, the more of the commissionary end of things. So the tobacco, big pharma, big tobacco, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's just kind of a quick rundown of the Tea Party and its associations.
We have a hand. Are you taking questions yet, Mont?
Yeah, of course. I'm just gonna add tariffs. Yeah. We can have. Let's have a dynamic discussion. We
Awesome.
always
Thank
do.
Okay,
you. Thank you, Mott.
Welcome.
Kelly, go ahead.
I just wanted to add with the Tea Party, according to William Henry Wirt and his 3-book homage to Patrick Henry, he made it really clear, and I was surprised to find out that the Tea Party was across all the colonies, every single harbor. They dumped the tea out of all the ships. It was every bit of tea that hit the land, that came to America, got dumped in the harbors at that time. But it was Boston were the only people who made a party out of it. Go figure. Boston, they made a party of it, and they dressed up like Indians, and that's why they were selected to be made to suffer the worst, and that's why they were, cut off. And it was also interesting to read about how the neighboring counties started collecting goods because like insulin for diabetics, like real situational things that we can't do without today. They couldn't do without then, and that how the band of people collecting goods to smuggle into Boston, which you could get killed for that. To bring them food and medicine and things such as that into the city because it was completely shut down. But I just thought it was really interesting that, it was a big, huge joint effort, and Boston was a scapegoat for it. So I just think that's important to keep in mind. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That is so true, and it's very good information. It's great to have that perspective. I think that we are almost on the hour now, so we should probably take a little bit of room service. So please share this space. This space will also be available on YouTube and as in MP3, MP4 format for if you are out running or you have friends that, so it's easily downloaded and so on. And with that said, keep your hands and feet inside the space wagon because the space might get a little bit bumpy and we want you all to be safe. And I will not crash any planes yet, not in these spaces, but it is a good thing. I think we can, we will continue.
Just an FYI, there's no bubble at the bottom, but if you hit that blue button, it'll help you retweet the space. It'll put it up onto your wall. But we don't have a bubble, but you could still hit that button and retweet the space. Thanks, guys.
Hey, and if you're on the Apple, you can hit the 3 dots up next to leave, and that'll give you the option to post it on your page too, just so you know.
The main post from Secretary of Space also has all of the content. So if you just continue down to post in there, Secretary's been putting things up in the nest for everybody as well. So you can go to that page.
Yeah, there is a whole chunk of reading. I mean, we are not trying to make this too complicated when we talk in these spaces. We try to keep it, pretty much straightforward. don't take anything we say for granted. Do your own research. Do your own critical thinking. But the aspect that we are aiming at here now, when we are getting close to the 1776, is that the people at that time, they had left Europe for a reason. They knew the nefarious actors. They for sure have heard about, the Swedish army conquering Europe and creating by the peace in Westphalia the concept of national state, because the church had started to lose a little bit of their power. There were power struggles within the church and so on, but still it was just the same, one church, one pope at that point in time. But the war starting to, getting all of this kind of different, it was splitting up a little bit, and, so they were, the Americans, which I will call them Americans, your ancestors, at this point in time, they were very aware of this. They were also very aware of New Sweden / Delaware, which is the first state that forms a state. Surprise! They are very aware of this. So, and this is what they do not want. They want freedom and a possibility to prosper on their own engine, on their own will, on their own effort, on their own work, on their own suffering. They want to have the possibility to prosper without having to be ruled and taxated into death. And they know this. They have this brought with them. This is what makes the US so unique, because this still is there. That kind of spirit is still there, as far as I can understand, at least with this.
Matt, you're spot on. I mean, the thing is, we have a joke, and that's usually out of any conflict whatsoever. We'll just call that conflict a dog pile. There's usually a Brit, and that couldn't be any more true, right? Because you look throughout history, and especially when we're coming to this pivotal moment, and keep in mind also, Massachusetts at that time, although they were the sixth state into the statehood of adoption, into the states of the Union at the time, they were a province. Okay. And so they already had the attachment to the crown. I mean, the crown was already established way back in the 1600s. As a matter of fact, the Queen Elizabeth set up her dominion in 1666, establishing the first post here in the modern day, what we know to be United States of America. So there was already, quite the overtaking. And so these are just the people that really wanted, they really wanted to have that, not just sense, but it was a deep desire to have the freedom and the like completely unattached, unabridged separation from this hierarchy. And so even though they were a province, there's a divide, and that's still, and I really wanted to add that point, because that divide, unfortunately, not because of people having a misconception and a disagreement about a belief or a faith system, right? But it was because of the malice behind the misinformation campaigns. And that is such an important thing to recognize, because even to this day, it is not, I believe this, and this is my opinion, but I believe that it is not the people themselves that aren't more in common than we think, but it is the divide amongst us because of what we know in our knowledge base. It is the information is what separates us, and who controls that narrative once again. It's always usually controlled by some sort of faction or factor of the crown. And that's usually where it's derived from. So even to this very day, Massachusetts is known as a commonwealth. They don't have, we have counties, which is similar to what they have in the UK and England, but we have, it's not, our counties are our strength, but not in the same sense as a British territorial sort of county would be. Kind of a nation established sort of thing with a flag. We do have a similar setup, but our strength really it's derived from the people, and that's the important thing to take away, because the people make up the counties, which then make up the states, and this is where our states each have their strength. But unfortunately, that's been flipped on its head because of this, this democratic rule of, crown overtaking once again.
Yeah, 1871, after we went through that in the first years of this business. We went through every banking era, and all of these, what should we call them, tryouts to try a banking system that would be oligarchy proof, which failed epically. It failed in 71, but or actually in 1913. That's the epic moment. But nevertheless, we have the ships, the East India Company ships. So the start of the 1776 is an attack on organized attack on the East India Company, not on the crown as such, on the East India Company. That should be noted. Write it down. It was a resistance / attack / let's say irregular warfare. Let's call it guerrilla warfare, whatever, on the East India Company, because East India Company was the power factor. It was under the crown, yes. It was connected to the crown, but then we also have to say, what is the crown? Who are they? What are they doing? And so forth. And the crown in this case is, the two oldest crowns in the world is actually the Swedish and the British. And they are pretty much the same. They are pretty much the same. It is Viking crown. It is from when the Romans left in the year of 300. The Vikings took it over. They had a little bit, as I talked about the last time, they had a hiccup in some years, and then they retook it, and from that day and on, they have been really keen on keeping it going, and of course making new, the US with all its natural resources, the vast resources, was of course very important. I wouldn't say that they had planned so early, but not in the 1800s, but in the 1900s for sure. The planning was already starting for the new banking concept, which is not new. It's just Oxenstierna 2.0. and the 1776, the constitution that will come out of this, it is, and I have said this many times, and I will say it again, it is a counteracting document in all of its intents and purposes to the Axel Oxenstierna doctrine, which have ruled the crowns. The crowns is not the ones that rules. The oligarchy, the banksters are the ones that have been ruling this. The crown have some powers, of course, but mainly they are there to keep it up and running. They have not the power. They have never, very early on, the king had power, of course, but as of the creation of the East India Company, and also that is the start of the military industrial complex. I was talking a little bit about that before with the ships, the guns, the cannons, and all of this out of Sweden. Everything is sort of in just in time delivery. And this is the trick. This is the part where Oxenstierna is the brilliant mind. He is the mind behind this and the central banking, as we see today. That is the plan, and he's very good at logistics and getting all of this done. This very famous Swedish king, the Gustav II, the lion. He said openly and frontly that I will be nothing without Axel Oxenstierna. I will be nothing with you, Axel, he said. Nothing. So he knew, he knew his place in this. He was, and his successor, Gustav III, one of his successors, he is actually counteracting the oligarchy. He is in 1776, he is sending his officers together with French soldiers or European soldiers, his officers that speaks English, French, all kind of language. It's a warrior nation. It's still, so they were available at this time. The war powers of this small little country way up north, the one that Tolkien is talking about always, should not be. Now it's nothing, thanks heaven, but it's not many years ago when I did my service and so on that we actually could make up 1 million man army in a country that has less population than New York. Think about that. Think about 1 million New Yorkers, top-notch military. Figure it out. It's quite a strange.
Yeah, and why New York? And this is one thing that a lot of people don't talk about, the French impact on things, what the Statue of Liberty actually is meaningful of.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness, the rabbit hole on that alone, and I'm not going to get in the weeds there, but there's always a controlling factor. And if you look at a modern day depiction, and I know this has rustled some feathers, but and thank you, Secretary, for putting that up there. If you look up in the nest, I have the 1947 North American Numbering Plan, the National Security Act, which then plays into 1971 with the Postal Reorganization Act. But if you look at the structuring, aside from the numbering system attached to the money, you look at the control ruling powers. So here's the Roman power grid, because all roads lead to Rome. What does that mean? Well, essentially, what they're not saying, though, is what Mott brought up. and that is the facet of the unspoken, the Swedish element that comes into play, as many of you know, because these are the people that are unspoken about. These are the people, the ruling 1% of the 1% that had such a hierarchy and control domination on the structuring powers that are depicted there. And if you look at the control factor of things, so you have the City of London. They handle all of the money and financing. This is all Rothschild backed banking, right? Which leads into the industrial complex of both not only the medical industrial complex, which was the beginning of the early 1900s with the medical mafia that took place, but then also the oil and how that played a role, right? Because I mean, essentially, if you really know and dig deep into it, it's all petroleum-based medicine. And that's the synthetic elements that is really dangerous for us to partake in. And so the ruling forces of money have always filtered through. They're the banker. They are like if the world had a bank, it would be essentially the City of London, right? And then who housed all the receipts? It would be the Vatican, the IMS, right? The Jesuits. So they're like the landlords of things. And this goes back to Roman civil law of 1266. And it's been a ruling force in a lot of elements ever since. And, then obviously you have the Vatican City under the Roman law. But this is the, essentially the war that's the silent war that's spoken about, because you have these three factors, but then the 1% of the 1%, like I said, goes back to Sweden, because these are the Wallenbergs, and these are the ones with the, the true power of the crown, right? The real crown behind the crown.
That the hidden hand behind the crown. That is how it.
Yep, exactly.
And as spoken, we had one king that stepped up to these people, and he I would not say that it is important. It's hidden in history. Just a few notifications of it, but you will see it in the paintings and so on from the 1776. You will see the blue and yellow soldiers wearing these colors, and this is the thousands, and yet in the thousands they arrived. That's about the information that we have on this. This is like a secret operation inside the 1776. Swedish officers and European soldiers, and mainly French, and Swedish officers speaking all languages and so on, and that can keep up with the revolutionary forces, and provide some professional military to them. So it has some real significance when it comes to the main battles of the 1776. But it's not really spoken about. The thing is that this guy, he made a revolution to take the power in Sweden. He also made a Kennedy, meaning that he issued a people's crown, because the Swedish, believe it or not, the Swedish money, the monetary, is called the crown. That's the only. The Danish, the Norwegians also have the crown as the krona is and we are still sort of stuck in that system. We don't really have a constitution or something like that here. We are still living in the kingdom of Sweden, and the government is representing the kingdom of Sweden. So we are not.
And what's your dollar called, Matt?
Sorry, one more time, John.
What is your dollar called?
Crown. Krona. And
Matt, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going back to East India Company. Mussolini said that you could call his form of government that you call it fascism, or you could call it corporatism. And so what my brain is trying to tell me, and what my brain is rejecting at the same time, is that the states initially, or the colonies, were fascism.
Yes.
See, the thing is, you have to go back and erase all this stuff out of my head to be able to put in what's reality. It's really challenging and upsetting. But I mean, I'm glad we're doing this. It's just, like I said, half of my brain was going, nah, the colonies were not fascist, nah, and they were.
They were, yeah.
Shit, they were.
In the beginning, they were. And of course, Delaware, that, they shifted name very quickly from New Sweden to Delaware, for practical reasons. They had a cooperation with the Dutch, and that goes for the Manhattan thing. That's the same guy that set up, this. He actually, yeah, it doesn't really matter, but that's why the corporations, all the big 500s, they are registered in Delaware. And if you look at Wilmington, aka Fort Christina, it is the same. It's still the same. This is the hard time when you talk to Karen and Joe in the US. They don't get this. They really don't want to hear this. so this is why Elon has pulled out his business from Delaware and put it in Texas. He's not stupid. He knows what he's doing.
It was kind of split though too. So in defense, and I'm going to put up a structure of the original form of government by the American people declared, right? And so this is where it gets confusing, because there is a split. There, to say that all of the founding fathers were Masons would be a lie. To say that all of the foundational elements were part of this British territorial monarchy corporation structure would be a lie, right? Because there were, just as much as there is a hidden hand of things on the nefarious end, there was very much a protected element into the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but more importantly, the Bill of Rights. Because what the Bill of Rights did was protect the people on a whole nother level. And so the very careful wording.
The militia, because
Yes,
it's a
exactly.
militia. And this is, you are a militia. You have the rights of a militia. This is the key point. This is the key
Until
point.
the Dick Act, until 1903 and the Dick Act, which messed up the militia really, really bad.
Yeah, correct.
Well, and the militia actually
That was
translated.
really profound. I really like that comment. Thank you.
Yes, and militia actually translated means the people. So if you look at the wording, it's a well-formed militia. And then this makes up the assembly of people, because
Right,
it's a well-formed
the Dick Act
assembly
of
of people.
1903, if you'll allow me, the Dick Act of 1903 separated the militia into the organized and the unorganized militia, making it two separate factions, of which now we the people are the unorganized militia, and the National Guard and the Standing Army, which our founding fathers staunchly said we should never have a standing army, never, ever, ever, because the only thing that can ever possibly happen from a standing army in your country, on your soil, is you will have them turn against you and they will rule you. And so that was why they said never, ever have a standing army. And the militia was supposed to be our force. And when the Dick Act was passed, the government snatched the teeth out of the American people's faces, and now all we can do is run around with our protests going, bark, 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 and bark about things, and we have no bite anymore because they took our bite. And I think to reinstitute and reinvigorate the Second Amendment is the only way we can get our country back, because you cannot have a republic and a standing army at the same time. You can't. It's not possible.
Well, and it was partially because we never abandoned our position. We were forced out, right? And so this is kind of what Mott was referring to with the Organic Act of 1871. It happened prior to that. It really took place in 1861. Essentially, that just kind of solidified things in stone of the complete hostile takeover, which is exactly what it was. It was a hostile takeover. It was an international effort too. This wasn't just here on American land and soil. This was an international effort because it was part of a global domination sequence that was taking place. And really, this was done by the privatized banks and the oligarchy with, the Templar rule, the crown, and the bar association, really. It essentially removed the militia, which is the people from their assembled posts, and it instituted a corporatocracy, really, and a hostile takeover of the bankers.
Yeah,
The
correct.
cooks and
Pete,
the
Pete,
ancillary people were the ones that fought it the longest. That they stood the longest against it. Americans folded. The militia folded, except for the ancillary people. So
Fish.
we gave that up.
Pete Grande, am I saying your name correctly? Did you have a question, sir? Or ma'am?
Thank you. I've got a question for Mott regarding the naming of the money, Sweden and American money. Now, I've heard a rumor somewhere that the reason as to why the dollar is
Volume.
called
I
the
can't
dollar.
hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you. Please start over.
Thank you. Now, I've got a question for Mott regarding the naming of the currency, because I've heard a rumor, and I'm hoping he can confirm this as true. A rumor that the reason as to why the dollar is called the dollar is because the former Swedish currency was called daler. Now, Daler. Now, I don't know
Yes.
if it's true, but I've heard it. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on the historical aspect of that.
On the linguistic side, we cannot be 100% sure, but there is a factor that will, well, sort of make it more reasonable or logical. This is when it comes to the maritime law, we need to dive into that rabbit hole now. The maritime law is coming out of the Hansa Association. The Hansa is, it starts around 1100, sort of 1100 century, late 1100 century, or early 1200 century. The Hansa is prior to the national states. Please remember in your notebook, there are no national states prior to the peace in Westphalia 1648. There are no national states. None. There are land masses, there are, a little bit of border-like things, but it's kingdoms and they are, and so on. And city-states for trade. And this trade union is formed from the Viking era. So it starts to shape itself. So the maritime law and this with the minting of the money will come out of the Visby from Gotland, the unsinkable carrier in the Oster Sea, the one that Russia always want to conquer, according to the Swedes, which the Russians really don't. It's a strategic. It's like Taiwan, but in a smaller scale in the Oster Sea. It's pretty important for war. And recreation. It's a nice holiday place actually to go to, but it's got the old trade. It was the old trade center. So in this upstart of the organization of the Hansa, which will end due to the East India Company, it will end. these city-states and the 30-year war and Axel Oxenstierna, so it will be destroyed. They form so from the early 1200th century to the East India Company and the 30-year war, the Sweden conquer Europe war. The set of rules for maritime and for minting money will come out of the Visby rules. Visby is the old trade, it's still there, the old trade center of the Hansa in the Ostseas, and it's like the heritage from the Vikings. So, and the language for the money back then was not crown, it was dollar, just as Mr. Grande says. And dollar is very close to dollar. If you just pronounce it like with a little bit of accent, it will actually sound the same. So, some regions in Sweden, when they say dollar, as in the old money, it will sound like dollar. So it makes some sense. And the maritime law is rewritten and used by the Spaniards and the Portuguese together with the doctrine of discovery. It is also then, when the East India Company appears, rewritten by the French. And now we are back on this in New York and the Statue of Liberty and the French and the legal things, the legalese things from the French. So they are rewriting the old Hansa law into what we today have as the maritime law. But do not forget that the grant of making war and peace, and also including the doctrine of discovery, those two were at the 1600 when the East India Company was formed. And straight after 1668, in 1670, the grant of making money, minting money, was granted to the East India Company. And believe it or not, but according to me, that is the foundation for the Fed. Some 100 years later, 243 years later, the Fed is formed under the same set of rules. This is why these sub-oligarchs, the ones that you see on TV, the Bidens, the UN people, all these nefarious actors, we need to have a rules-based system. We need to have a rules-based system. That is the rule. That is the rule that they are talking about. This is the rule. This is the rule of minting money, granted in 1670 in correlation to the world's first central bank, created by Mr. Oxenstierna. So this is the still, we are in, well, some few breaths more. I hope that I will live through this to see this change. We are still in the same legal realm, and it from the, let's say, 100 city-states at the top of the Hansa, this old Viking rule of the minting of money that was granted through the maritime law at that point in time, they were mixed together and then they were separated. So don't get confused. But those were taken on by the Hansa cities, the trade cities, the city-states, we could call them. And those were not just around the Ostseas. They were in London, in Amsterdam, everywhere. They were connected to this, and they were taken over by the East India Company in that aspect, and their old banking as well. So the name of the money that they were using were actually dollar. They had some other German names as well for the money, and it changed a little bit through the times. But nevertheless, it's quite possible, P. Grande, I would say. I have not dug into that rabbit hole too deep, but it seems reasonable enough, at least to throw it out there to somebody that actually could know something more about it. And I can see two hands now, Tisha. So it's both Grande and yeah. Go ahead, Tish. You are the boss.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any hands. But does anybody else? Is anybody's hands raised? Just give me another. I think they're all gone. Pig Grande.
I don't see any hands, Tish.
Yeah, I think we're good with the hands, Mott. But if you guys could retweet the space, that would be wonderful. And follow everybody. Follow Mr. Mott. Follow John. And let's get rolling. Any questions? Feel free to please grab a mic and ask a question. We'd love it.
Yeah. Come up. Please, all questions are very welcome. And please, if you grab a mic, don't be afraid to interrupt and state whatever you have on your mind, because I have nothing at all against being interrupted with those kind of questions. Whatever, because I know we can get somewhat long-winded sometimes, and I hope you don't fall asleep. That you keep your notebooks open.
Well, you got to remember, history repeats itself, so we are graced with this history lesson because it seems to repeat itself, and maybe we could stop it in its tracks. So anybody wants a mic, please come up and get one. Here we got Money Penny.
You're spot on, Tish, because what they do is they have the same playbook. It's the same exact act. They just call it a different name. And so if you're not familiar with familiar with what it's going to look like, which you have to go back in history and kind of analyze what a similar situation would be like, you're just going to fall into the same trap over and over again.
Yeah, money's up. Come on, Money.
Good, Money Penny. How are you?
Hi there. Great space. Some really interesting stuff, actually. I didn't know a lot about the East India Company. I knew of it in reference, but yeah, that was fascinating. Really good stuff. Really enjoyed it. Really, I'm going to go off and find out more about it now. I'll go and watch a documentary about it, because that's what I tend to do. So I was an economist, and obviously I'm based in London, well, I'm in the UK, in the city. And so I'm fascinated about the whole origination of the banking system. And I look towards the LET system, the local exchange trading system, which is a sort of barter type thing that began. And then obviously the elitism of the landowners, which we don't realize the breakdown of words. When we have landlords, they were lords of the land, that effectively would take the people that were living on their land, the peasants, and tax them for living on their land. And that's sort of, started off the idea of, keeping your cash somewhere safe, or your bill of notes, as it was, because they were scribbled bits of paper with "I promise to pay you such and such" on it. But I'm interested in the trading thing going forward. So the Suez Canal and the South China Sea are very much the two areas at the moment that over 50% of all international trade goes through the South China Sea, and I think it's 80% plus through the Suez Canal. And so in recent years, we've had a lot of problems where the Suez Canal has had issues, and there was that tanker that tried to turn around and got stuck. That was a bit bizarre, but we've had more political and war related issues. How does India itself and the relationship between India and China affect or impact, if it does, trade routes now? Because what is there still friction between India and China in terms of international trade? And is there any system by which India is given favourable access to the South China Sea and the trading lines? That's my question. Thank you.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's put it in a historical perspective. So, at the point of time when let's call it when the Kiev kingdom was founded, I think we all heard Tucker Carlson's interview with our dear friend Tucker Carlson. There is another Tucker Carlson also that we will talk about later on when we get into the 20th century. But that's another another topic. So it's really interesting because Moneypenny, as we should comprehend, is that it's just the last 100 years that we have transported things on land efficiently, meaning the railroads, the development of railroads and roads, of course, and of course the trucking. I mean, manufacturing of trucks, also very important. But so the Vikings, they were able to control the waterways in a way that they also could control the trade. And this is what will be developed into the Hansa, and with the minting of money and so on. When barter or gold, silver, whatever, is not the only. Well, this is prior to banking. So control waterways, because that's the only efficient way to even transport anything or to make trade. And the Vikings were very skilled at this. So the Dnieper, they even had the Varinga Guard at Constantinople, at the Bosporus. They had Rollo and his boys at the English Channel. Of course, they had the Ostersea totally covered, and so on. So they just scaled it up, and of course, they still wanted to keep the control of the waterways. So now I'm going to just take a giant leap here, Moneypenny, if you bear with me. So the most essential part of where we are today with the Israel thing, which is about this region trying to control the flow of trade and goods, just as you totally accurately are stating here about the Suez Canal and the Evergreen doing drifting in the Suez Canal, which is quite interesting, actually. It has to be on purpose, that incident with Evergreen, very large container ship getting stuck sideways. I like to go sideways, but both in cars and otherwise. But so the control over the sea, we have the East India Company, we have the Suez Canal, we have the Panama Canal, of course, which is very, very critical because of the cost of freight. This is just the efficiency and the cost of trade or moving goods and the control over that. This is very important. So just to put it really bluntly, at the end of the era of the East India Company, the British, we had also a Swedish, of course, and we have Russell and Company, and that's the three. The Dutch, of course, that's the three major ones, actually, four major ones that is moving here. So at the end, in the 1874, when they put it out, then actually, believe it or not, the ones that holds the telecom and energy, the Wallenberg family, they have the largest fleet available when the modernization of the shipping is going on. When you go from sailing ships to steel ships with diesel engine or raw oil engines. And here the Nobel family, the Nobel Prize, aka the merchant of that prize, this is very, very, very important. They are the kings of oil. When oil is not a refined, it's refined, but it's not a combustion engine is not at the working yet, so to speak. But they are coming. So in Baku, the Nobel family is the kings of Baku, the king of the kings of Russia. They are friendly with the Tsar. They are running the business. Actually, the Rothschilds are there as well in Baku. And this is then Standard Oil, Rockefellers, and all of this. They are not, they are surfacing, but they are not, in any power at this moment in time. So this is 1890 about, and things is moving forward very quickly. So one of the Nobel brothers actually designs the first oil tanker with a raw oil driven engine and so on. And here you go. So the sail ship era is gone. It's out of the door. And the Nordic wharves and engine builders, Wärtsilä, the diesel, that's a Wallenberg as well, these big diesel engines or raw oil engines that sits in almost all of the big ships all over the world. They are way ahead of the competition. So in order to make the Third Reich work, they are cooperating, the Third Reich project. So they are spearheading this. They have the largest fleet from 1900 and a bit forward until the US and the UK is and the Dutch is catching up on this with the steel boats and the freight boats and so on. So yet again, small Nordic countries, but really powerful in the global trade, as per usual, as from the Vikings. So this is what is pushing the agenda of the creating the Suez Canal and keeping control over that area. And then, we can reference Alexander the Great, and if we want to, and Alexandria, and how they conducted the shipping back then. Anyways, so we have the power of Nordic shipping. We are lining up for Israel to keep control over that area, because the Ottoman Empire are with German engineers building a railroad connecting the land masses, the African continent, the Asian continent, and this railway runs where Israel is today. So the plan is very simple. The Zionists are going to create a forever war in that area. The first thing that will happen in the First World War is that the Ottoman Empire will be taken over, and that railway is going to be blown up to heaven. Kaboom! So this is the reason, and that is also, the importance of keeping control of the shipping and the flow of goods and trade. So that is why the First World War, as I said before, it's just a stepping stone. And the real practical reason is just to put an end to any kind of land transportation in an orderly manner or in an efficient manner through that area. It is a long-winded answer. Moneypenny, please come back on that one and see if I missed something, or if you follow my train of thoughts here, because this is why the Zionists are formed, because it is the Warbers, the Wallenbergs, the Rockefellers, the Ford, and all of these that is forming this. This is not coming out of thin air. This is not a political movement. It's a practical movement for the oligarchy. And to make my point very clear there, this is something that people don't want to hear in any spaces that you go in and want to talk to. I'm just going to say one name, Otto Warburg. That is the main player in creating the Israel. On that side, there is another Otto Warburg who got the Nobel Prize. They are cousins, so this is not the same Otto Warburg. This one is hidden, not talked about so much. He is the Zionist leader between 1908 to 1920, 1910 to 1920, something like that. So he is the first guy in place in Israel to dig down there, to dig the trenches there, to get it up and running. And then of course the Havara will come later on, and so on. And he's a friend of the Wallenbergs. He knows of course the rest of the Warburg family, the Hambros, the Kuehn Loeb, all the banks, and so on. So he just takes, Theodor Herzl, he's just doing the promo for this, and then Otto Warburg makes everything happen, and he stayed a Zionist leader until 1920, and he said, nope, I'm here in Israel, somebody else is just going to do the European bullshit, I'm going to do the Israel thing. And believe it or not, still 100 years later, or more than 100 years later, today, when we sit and speak about this is what happened, this is the reason for it, and it's the same banking families, it's the same ones, and it's about, as Moneypenny elegantly put out, this is about the water transport, the transportation of goods and on sea, which is still so important. I missed out a bit with Taiwan with India and China. The India-China relations seems to be better now than that they ever been. So let's hope and pray that they can keep a cool head. It seems like the Chinese are doing a good thing with that. It seems like Moody is doing a good thing with that. And if there is no hiccups there, I would assume that India will grow alongside with China as an economical factor, with Russia just hovering, a little bit on the side. That was a long answer. Moneypenny, please.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I lost my signal there, but you stopped. Wow. I have to say, wow. Fascinating stuff as ever. Now I'm going to blow your mind and tell you, I worked in St. Catherine's Dock for 4 or 5 years, which is part of the East India Docks. And I was in a commodity trading company for a while. I was actually on the compliance side of it. I had this sneaky job where I had to sit in this little room with a telephone exchange around me, effectively, and I would plug in my headphone set to the telephone receivers of all these. Well, at the time, they were sort of big shoulder pad wearing, cocaine snorting, rich wannabe kids that were flogging orange juices, pork bellies, and anything they could get their hands on to make money. And that's what St. Catherine's Dock and East India Dock was famous for. They had all these commodity stockbrokers before what we call A-Day in regulation terms, all set up in the docks, along with what we call really sort of preppy homes, very, very posh flats that were going for several million, even though, less than half a mile away, you had little rundown council houses that, were absolutely squalid. And I worked in St. Catherine's Dock at a time when I suppose London was probably at one of its highest points just before the crash. This is giving my age away here, which is probably not a good thing. Um, so it is fascinating that when we look back at it, and as you've explained, the whole reason that the British drink tea and are taking the mick out of the drinking tea is down to that huge, great big million, well, I say dollar, £1 million trade that was done and started all through the trade coming in there, together with things like silks and some of the more exotic Persian carpets and all those sorts of things. But the tea came in there. But I think the most significant thing is financial services centre of London becoming what it was in many ways, because our naval capabilities, our naval resources were such a fundamental part of enablement of trade that it became something that people became dependent on in a sort of I don't know, holding them hostage, which is not dissimilar to what happens today with those larger institutions that you mentioned, whether it be the Vanguards or the BlackRocks or the JP
Or
Morgans,
the investor,
the
or
families
the
of the
investor, or
Rothschilds.
the investor,
Yes,
or the investor. The
yeah,
investor is the Wallenberg.
yeah.
So they are actually the largest official owners of Vanguard. So, people don't see them. I know that you know about them since you've been hanging around, yeah. I want to tell you about intelligence services because I know that you are acquainted with this as well. So the very, very first intelligence service is about tea, actually. In the modern aspect of it, in the modern aspect of it, of course, that, as I said before, they also been around. So this is quite a good snippet of history. The East India Company sent.
Matt, are you about to read the tea leaves by chance?
No, not really, but almost. Hang on now. So the first corporate espionage that is documented is the East India Company sending a couple of people that pretended to be botanists or whatever. Actually, Otto Warburg, the Zionist leader, he was also a botanist. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Or the main Zionist leader about Israel, the founding father of Israel, Otto Warburg, married into all kinds of families. They are married into they are sort of everywhere. Warburg, Wallenberg, very good friends. Hambros, very good friends. Morgans, very good. Yeah. So anyways, in the early days of the East India Company, they sent out botanists that actually were spies. They wanted to know how the Chinese made the tea because they didn't really have the knowledge of how to. They understood the mains of it, but they didn't have the knowledge how to refine it and so on. So they were sent out. The Chinese believed them, sort of. So they actually took the knowledge, recruited people, paying them off, bribing them off to get their own knowledge of how to manufacture tea. So that's where the Ceylon tea comes from. They moved those people there. So this is the first case of industrial espionage on a large scale. This is when the East India Company sends out botanists, aka spies, to travel around in China to gather the information, recruiting people, doing a nefarious operation with inside China and stealing the knowledge specialists of how to make tea. So this is the East India Company, and this I consider to be the grandmother of MI5 and MI6. Over and out.
We have a hint. We have. Oh, go ahead, Money Penny. I'm sorry, honey.
He just made an excellent connection to my Money Penny and James Bond. So if other people didn't work that one out, because some people don't make the connection. That was lovely. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time and your insight.
Thank you. John has had his hand up. Mr. Mott.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the importance of, in Moneypenny, you're spot on when you're referencing the, let's just call them the merchant marine aspect of the control aspect, and when it comes to, part of the takeover before East India Company was actually formed, because there was the swooping point, I guess you can look at it as, and that was during the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, and this was an opportunity for essentially the trade inception, for them to get their foot in the door in that area, because at that time the spice trade was essentially it was monopolized by Spain and Portugal until that time. And so when this was officially incorporated, and that's the key word, incorporated, because don't you find it a little bit of an oxymoron that trade and incorporation are in the same context or situations, sentence? Because trade was always, in the form of no real governing force or body, right? It was just amongst the people. And
no tariffs.
Yep, exactly. So really, if you think about it, the fact of what East India Company, because it was an incorporated entity, right, in 1600 by royal charter, it was incorporated. And so essentially what that did was it seized, upon any sort of interaction of what trade truly is and was, and it turned it into a monopoly, really, and essentially a monopoly in the sense of a ruling force now governed by this company. And so they got in 12 years later, post the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and this gave the English a chance to break up the monopoly, which was controlled in that spice trade in that area of India. And the interesting thing, looking at it from that point, fast forwarding to the canal and what took place in modern times, if you look at the time frame, what took place, and the interesting part of it was not India necessarily itself, because what took, and I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit here, but it'll tie in, because just after the inception of the British getting into this, a spice trade opened the door to the East more. And that's essentially what I believe was the goal, right? Because now you're going into China, and now you have this area where you can trade, and they ended up doing this as well, because not only were they a part, were the English and the East India Company a part of the agents of the British imperialism in India, early 1700s, to I mean, essentially the mid 1800s. But what that did was open the door for other textiles, right? So silk and cotton and so on and so forth, which was all part of the transportation. In what took place then, it was the transportation of slaves, right? So 17, like, uh, so what was that, like 30s, 40s, something like that, 50s, and all the way up until, the 1770s, essentially, was the slave trade then. And so where China comes into a big part of this, fast forward now to, like I was saying, the canal. And so right around that same time, Bitcoin was actually seized in the Chinese markets from trading. Now, wonder why that could possibly have happened, and could possibly I don't know, the intelligence agencies, in conjunction with possibly, I don't know, Ukraine and maybe some other areas, be, a part of this maybe illicit trade system of funds. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, but it's quite interesting, the timing, uh, and the ship going sideways, so to say. But I wanted to add that point because it really was not like a coincidence that, yeah, they went into this massive hub that for so long was, part of a trade route, which never stopped to be a trade route, and still such a pivotal role in so many things. But yeah, absolutely, definitely all about shipping, control, monetary perspective, ruling force. In controlling not only the narrative, but the big companies that are involved in this as well.
The battle you refer to is the key moment, the 1588. I think there is a saying about Elizabeth on that one, but I need to check that up. But I think that's a pivotal moment for her going forward, actually, with the let's call it the Viking spirit, as the Wallenbergs say today. The Slav, the slaves. This comes from the Viking had another name for it, but the Slavs are still the Slavs, and the natural resources of Russia, stretching to 13 time zones with vast natural resources. I mean, they have not even, they have just scratched the surface on that yet. That has always been the aim of, the Scandinavian / US oligarchy these days. They have tried, but the problem is that, as in Tucker Carlson and Putin's interview, that the Slavs are really sprung out of the Vikings from Rurik. This is why, I mean, Putin is, he knows what he's talking about, Tucker maybe got a little bit derailed or whatever when he started to talk about Rurik. The fun thing was that we had talked about that in the Swedish historical space the same evening before that interview. Intentionally, because I had a hunch that it will be brought up, because Putin is really interested in the history, and he has a good understanding of it as well. So Slavs is actually a rename, a back name for slave. You can easily catch the similarity. So
Slavs. You said Slav. Okay.
Yeah. The Vikings were very keen on trading on that back in the day, from the get go. So they were trading people. it didn't look exactly like the kind of the what we imagine, the US slave trade, whatever. The slave trade hub, believe it or not, Saint Bartholomew, where the books were burned, just as with the Swedish East India Company. Oh, sorry, the books were burned. So instead of the Swedes had some own slave trade, whatever, but they, as per usual, they said, well, let's hang on here. We have done this before. So what we do is that we set up St. Bartholomew, where the trade was done, and they cut in on the trade instead.
Money Penny, did you have a question, hon?
Yeah, just interesting when you were talking about the start of an interview. I found it fascinating because I did a little thing. I did a little YouTube video, I think it was about it, how much he knew his economics and how much he very cleverly said that Biden effectively was completely stuffing himself by forcing them to use the yuan, yuan, however you want to pronounce it, instead of the dollar, which was a really stupid thing to do, given there was now this fervent oil trade and industrial military hardware trade all happening in the US dollar at a huge quantity. Sorry, not happening in the dollar, happening in the Chinese currency instead of the dollar. I thought his economics insight was remarkable. He knew all the figures, he was quoting them. And as you say, he's a pretty canny guy. But I did learn that somebody said to me he did study economics at some point before he went into the military. But it was fascinating.
Yeah, he's a fascinating figure, all in all. He is probably dedicated to do what he's doing now for since he was a young lad. I would say, and I would say people will call me, back here in Mordor, they will scream, "Oh, Putin lover," whatever. Yeah, he has his backsides as well. But overall, they have reformed the banking system. They are, for example, I think they are trying to show something. The optics of it. If
But do you think a BRICS currency is likely? I mean, because the BRICS currency was talked of just in the last 48
yeah,
hours. Um, yeah.
yeah,
For
and
America? You,
No, against the
oh,
dollar. This is the whole
oh,
point.
right,
The
right,
BRICS
right.
countries
I
are
see what you're
now,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the Fed dollar will be dead. The banksters dollar, the world trade currency as of Bretton Woods 1944, where Keynes, who actually, P. Grande, tell us about the Swedish economists that Keynes and all of these, let's say, prominent uh, financial gurus, you could call them, or financial system gurus, because we are back in Sweden again, Moneypenny. Believe it or not, we are back again. The first word, central bank, blah, 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 and also the strategy. So P. Grande, if you still are available to talk, I cannot see. I see you as listener because my...
Yeah. I remember the Swedish krona and the Belgian franc, and I used to have this machine when I was at Chase Manhattan called Tally Rate, and it used to print out cross currencies. So you'd look at how the currencies were interoperating. So I'd have to write long analytical reports on how the Swedish krona or the Belgian franc or the German Deutschmark or whatever it was operating. But Sweden, I'm sorry, was put in the same catchment as Belgium as not being fundamental because Germany was pretty much running everything at the time that I was in the city doing all my Forex stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't remember it being hugely, hugely
No, no,
important.
no, no, no. The krona as such is not important. The Wallenbergs has, Sweden is a company. Sweden is an incorporation, just as Switzerland, just as the Vatican, just as Washington D.C. and the City of London. So what the krona is worth or not worth, it has some, but the FX market, as of, after the Nixon shock, it is just a very large washing machine for black money. That is what it is. It cannot. It will always be. It's just a washing machine. It doesn't really contribute to anything, but keeping the machine, the system rolling. It is. I think it's the kind of the world's the worst possible way. Let me put it this way. First, the people go to the bank and take out a loan to create the currency in their own countries, regardless of country, almost regardless, in the country. So you take a loan to create new money out of thin air, and you put the interest on the top. And then between the countries, you trade this money to create to steal even more from the people in the FX market, which is it is just a big scam, actually. It's not as big. It's not as big as the central banking system, but it is a big scam. I don't know what to say more about it. It's just.
Yeah, to put it simply, your money is debt. The money
Yeah.
in circulation, the actual money is your credit or the credit you've been granted and the debt that you own to the bank. Approximately 99% is fictitious money, and then you've got some printed as well, but they're backed against the debt anyway. And here's the problem with that as well. There's a certain
Can you
value.
possibly put your mic up? I'm really
Sorry,
struggling to hear you.
can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Yeah,
A little better, yeah.
So the problem with this as well is the fact that if a debt that can't be repaid has no value, but as long as there's some sort of confidence in the system or this big pyramid scheme, then the debt has value, and you can sell the debt as well to somebody else who can claim it from whomever is owes the money.
The debt slave.
Exactly, yeah. So speaking to the historical aspects of Swedish banking, I'm afraid I'm not that. I don't know that much. I think you know a lot more than me, Mott. But if you look at the Swedish economists nowadays, for example, if you make a reference to Sweden at the moment, they're starting to dip their toes into the topic, but they're basically afraid or afraid of having to admit that they have been part of a pyramid scheme.
Scam.
They've been lying all the time, yeah. But the mechanics of how the money is actually manufactured, so to speak, the when you go to the bank and get a loan and so on and so forth, they're very reluctant to admit the mechanics of this, and I've actually tried getting an answer from the boss, I guess, of the Swedish Riksbank. They won't answer me. I've asked them to explain how money is made simply enough for a 6-year-old to understand, because you can do that if you want to, but nobody does that. So,
No.
so that's basically what I can say on the topic. We've got some economists that are let's say, famous in Swedish media that some of us in Sweden know, that they know, because some people with in-depth knowledge have told them, and it's been recorded on video as well, but they refuse to speak about it anyway. They drop some hints here and there, but they don't
They don't address the root cause of it.
exactly, and they don't explain it in its entirety.
Keynes did it at Bretton Woods. He fought furiously because he was very acquainted with the let's say the opposition of the central banking system and so on. That actually was Swedish, believe it or not. He was very acquainted with that, and he knew if you just transfer the pound sterling to the dollar as a world trade currency, the pound sterling with the East India Company, with the Rothschilds, with the Bank of England, the second central bank of the world, 1694. Edward III, I think, was to sign that. With inside the framework of City of London, formed by the Viking, Edward the Conqueror. William the Conqueror. Actually, the relative or the grandfather of whatever. Yes, some generations in between, but actually Elizabeth is straight on to him, and that's the sort of the Swedish English / German crown. Coburg, Gotha, Saxon, whatever, and then we put some Frenchman to the crown here in Sweden because he helped out with the fight with Napoleon, or whatever we could say, sort of a traitor, whatever. It's the oligarchies, it's that is playing this game. So the crown is what the crown is. We have a couple of old crowns: the British crown, Viking crown; the Swedish crown, Viking crown.
Can I just interject and ask a question as well regarding Napoleon? I looked it up recently, and he, if I'm not mistaken, he received the Order of the Seraphim as well.
Yeah, he did.
And then they brought in a king that counteracted him in one way or another. So,
yeah,
very strange.
Yeah, they probably have I think there is a woman in between there. Actually, I think there is some kind of but sooner or later we'll find out. I think there is intrigue there. so they both are sort of they are interlocked with the Swedish crown and the Swedish oligarchy and with the European oligarchy. They are interlocked. Even so, believe me now, Moneypenny, Sempill. Sempill is one of the more important players with regards of one of the, let's call it, more obvious psyops ever, Pearl Harbor. He, of course, he didn't receive the Seraphim Order, but he received the Polar Star Order just a few years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and after the Second World War. And he's the architect, together with some other people, Churchill and all of this, of course, involved in the Pearl Harbor psyop, because Pearl Harbor is a psyop and nothing else. It's so obvious, and still it's really strange. What's more strange is that to make sure that it, they really made an effort, the Japanese, as per usual. So they actually had airplanes on board submarines, actually 2 or 3 of them. One of them actually made a bombing that killed actually some kids and a teacher or a mom, whatever, in Oregon. to make sure that you had an attack on the US from the Japanese. So they actually transported airplanes that they lifted out of submarines and attacked on American soil. And this is just in conjunction or in conjunction to Pearl Harbor. This is really, it's so out of the. It is, yeah. I really don't know what to say about it. But and talking about spy balloons, actually, the Japanese also, in conjunction to Pearl Harbor, they launched 900,000 air balloons with bombing devices that should, 1 or 2 of them actually reached the United States with what are they called? This kind of hyperflow winds, whatever, that you know where you will. So they made a really good effort in actually making a case of that we are really attacking the US, to make it believable for the believers. In a military sense, or in a naval military sense, or in a whatever whatever context, the Pearl Harbor and these submarines and this kind of, it's a PR stunt. It's a psyop. It cannot be anything else. It's you have all these English players, Sam Pill, which actually allegedly is the role model for Mr. James Bond, Moneypenny. That's why I'm talking about it, because you were here. So allegedly he is the base case for Mr. Bond. Believe it or not, look him up.
Wow.
Look him up, and he got the Polar Order from Sweden, of course. It's like a Nobel Prize for the really. It's sort of above the Nobel Prize actually, but it's not for the public. It's just for the ones that you know. And the Seraphim Order, which. And ladies and gentlemen, please keep your hands and feet inside the space wagon. Grab your handlebars, and please do not fall out of the wagon. The Seraphim Order was handed over to the Emperor Hirohito the Younger. He went from his 18th birthday, when he was, officially the heir of the Japanese emperorship. The first thing he does is that he takes a trip, and this is in the 1920s or something like that. The first thing he does on his after his 18th birthday, when he's sort of crowned the coming emperor, is that he travels to Sweden just a few days after, whatever time it took to travel, get his Seraphim Order, get his marching orders as well, I guess, and goes back, and then he's crowned the emperor. And then Hirohito, he holds back. He refused to retreat. And now we are talking optics again. Now we're talking psyop again. He refused. The army, the navy, the whatever. They are telling him, we need to quit this war. This is just stupid. We have lost. Let's hoist the white flag. Please, Mr. Emperor. But the Emperor is God in Japanese sense there. He refuses until Hiroshima and Nagasaki happens. Okay, how did Hiroshima and Nagasaki happen? Well, we are back in Sweden. Without Sweden, without Ljungaverk, without the heavy water, and without the trigger mechanism for the Manhattan Project. And of course, same thing was provided to the Nazis because they were sort of friendly, with inside the project. So for me, the Manhattan Project is a part of the Third Reich project. If you consider it, it was just a matter of who were the first to get the knowledge of this. And we will talk about Mr. Bekeland, who, just as Ivar Kreuger, who was mentioned in the Cornelius space earlier today, he had to die because he was the inventor of the discovery and the tech behind the uranium, the A-bomb, more or less. That was handed over to Lise Meitner and Otto Hahn. Otto Hahn accidentally got the Nobel Prize. Lise Meitner accidentally were employed for life by the Nobel Committee here in Sweden. And she also decoded the trigger together with the cousin of hers who made some tech things there. She was sitting here in Sweden and doing this in Ljungaverk in Sweden. So the Manhattan Project have not happened without Lise Meitner. And this was actually headlines in the news. So this is not hidden. This is not a secret. This is just that we are not aware. So, and she was on the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, founded by Rockefeller, before she moved to Sweden and started to, do the atomic nefarious stuff to make a bomb. So no Lise Meitner, no Wallenbergs, no Ljungaverk, no heavy water, no A-bomb. And, well, there you go. And Hirohito then, he was under the order from the Swedish US oligarchy to do not surrender until we have blown the A-bomb because we're going to start the Cold War. We need to scare people up. It makes sense. It's logical. Everything is there. It's official public knowledge. I'm just doing my interpretation of it. I might be wrong, but she traveled to the US and visited her old friends. And hang on now, that came to the US from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in the early 30s, even before Smedley Butler blow the whistle on the fascist coup. They were there already. So she made the grand tour of the US, talking with these guys and all of this, because she was supposed to be some kind of heroine or whatever. I don't know, to make the masses believe in the A-bombs thing. And but as I said, her co-scientist on the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, he received a Nobel Prize for this. Christian Bekeland, though, the inventor, he died all alone in a hotel room with a gun on his bedside table from an overdose. It's not far-fetched to go to another person that died all alone in a hotel room after having shot himself in the heart with a broken hand, with the wrong hand as well. That is one of the most mysterious suicides ever. And this is on the evening where this person called Ivar Kreuger has made the best he could. It was the happiest day of his life, though he had buried his friend, who also died under mysterious circumstances, and that's the Prime Minister of France. And these guys, they were counteracting the Bank for International Settlements in 1932. Both of them died in a very short amount of time. Ivar Kreuger's body came home to Sweden. He was actually, just by accident, he was the world's richest man. He owned and controlled lots of companies, especially he was the matchstick king. He has the patent on the matchstick, which is a good product. And he also was a big share owner in the Ericsson company, the phone company, the Wallenbergs, Ericsson, the one that Trump is going after, that has Space Force on top of it. And Space Force has probably taken them over and their technology as well, because they are running their AI right now as we speak. They are running the WASP, Wallenberg AI. They are running it, and they are probably flying the X-37Bs and all of these kind of vehicles that we have high up in the sky in the space with their technology. So hopefully, Trump and the team have made a good effort there and got this under control. I don't know, but we could guess. So Ivar Kreuger, he dies after shooting himself in the heart, which is a very odd way of taking your life. Very, very rare. His body is coming home to Sweden, and no autopsy is allowed for some kind of reason. And this is, you are in the company of Mordor, aka Sweden. And this creates a whole lot of, people, journalists and so on being, quite, but it's all just put a lid on it and so on. And 3 weeks later, a French law firm, back to you again, John, back to the Statue of Liberty, a French law firm that doesn't speak Swedish or whatever, come up to Sweden, and the Swedish state and the Wallenbergs take over all of his businesses because they were bankruptcy and blah, 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 which is a total fucking cover-up story. It's a lie. And yeah, it is what it is. Very strange situation. And from that day on, it takes 6 months, and then the little guy with the mustache is in power. Ivar Kreuger, Aristide Briand, they had to go for getting Hitler in place to run the Third Reich project. The Bank of International Settlements were already in place, and as soon as the war started, Thomas McKittrick, the protege of Wallenberg, who reformed the German banking system, you know all these steps that has to be taken to make the German people suffer, and then suddenly the little guy with the mustache have all the money in the world. He has a carte blanche to do whatever. And surprisingly enough, the Germans are buying into this wholeheartedly because everything is getting totally nice. Oh, we have an open mic. Here we go. And we are at the hour soon.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was my mic. Does anybody want to come up for a question? Now's the time.
Yeah, that's we are on wrap up time now, aren't we?
Yes, actually we are. Any last questions? Because I'm gonna wrap it up, and pick up where we left off. We'll follow up on Thursday, correct, Mutt? Thursdays?
Yeah, follow up on Thursday. Next step. Of course, we are jumping forth and back in time here, but I think we stuck pretty good to the
this was great.
topic. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Fantastic. So, if anybody has questions you might think of, please DM me, the secretary, John, Mr. Mott, and we'll get those answers to you. And we'll see you on Thursday because and come with any information you might have, which would enlighten us as well. We really appreciate you coming. This was wonderful. Remember, history does repeat itself, so we got to learn what happened back then so we prepare ourselves for now. God loves you. God bless you, and have a great evening. Thank you, Mr. Mott.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mott, and
Thank you.
Secretary, and Tish.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody. Thank you, Moni Penny, and thank you, Mr. Grande, for coming up and speaking. And please, to all your great listeners, please go up in the Jumbotron and bookmark the stuff that is there.
Lots of reading material. Yeah, you're gonna love it, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna put some. I will put some tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, I will put some material underneath the space since we don't have the bubble to put it in. I will put some complementary material there, which is long readings. But if you have the time, please spare the time and get those reading. And thank you everybody for being here today, or this evening, or this afternoon. For us, it's quite late in mortar now, so getting a little bit warm. But it's been great. I know that I talk too much, but hopefully you get some content out of it. And as I said, thank you, John, thank you, Tish, and thank you, Mr. Grande, and thank you, Moni Penny. That was really great that you came up. It was a good contribution, and I actually enjoy talking to you because it gives some James Bond perspective, some East India tea perspective, and so on. And well, the Viking crown is what the Viking crown is. We have to get rid of it to make the world a better place. That's the way it goes.
Not me, not the Vikings. I'm like,
no, the crown.
She gone. You're out of here, Tish.
I'm teasing. I love you guys. This was wonderful. And once again, if you have any suggestions, DM us, and make sure anything's answered that you don't understand. And whatever you can bring to the table, that'd be wonderful too. Look at
not to the table, Tisha. To the bank.
Oh, to the bank. I'm sorry. To the bank.
Or your pipe. You could put that in your pipe and smoke it then afterwards, right? I would. One thing I want to add too, real quick, before we wrap it up, is
sure.
maybe look at how France and Germany play a role in not just occupation but jurisdiction, especially around the World War I time frame as well, because it had a big part into. As Mott so perfectly puts it, the little man with the mustache comes into play.
Yeah,
so the little
man. The little man with the mustache. Yes.
Yeah. The occupation of Dresden, keeping Germany down. Keeping Germany down is very, very essential to after the First World War. It's very, very essential for kicking the Second World War into speed as it's supposed to be. And here the actors are very visible. Both Wallenberg, Ford got the highest order from the Nazis, and so on and so forth. So this period of time is very interesting. please check it out a little bit. Check League of Nations, the forerunner for the UN, which is nefarious, and for UNESCO, which is, believe it or not, the first boss of UNESCO is no other than Julian Huxley, the nefarious brother of the Huxley brothers. The other one is the one that wrote a little thing called A Brave New World. And believe it or not, Mein Kampf.
Wow, really?
Yes, and believe it or not, Mein Kampf is not written by Hitler. There's no possibility that he could have done it.
Do you know who wrote it? Do you know?
It's a IG Farben thing, you know. They were the ones running the show, so they had some hired-in people to do that.
Interesting.
And it's published on the Warburg. What's that called in English? Oh, I lost the name. The publisher is the Warburg. Warburg Brothers of London that is publishing that. And
Sorry,
also...
Mark. Yeah, you were getting to, I was going to add, I think you're getting to it, so I'll just shut up.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead, Big Randy.
Yeah, if you know, please.
It is, everybody knows George Orwell, of course. Some interesting details about him is that he is actually a Blair. So same family as Tony Blair, Mark Blair, I think.
Really?
Yes. And his
wow.
book, 1984, was published by the Warburg publishers as well.
What?
Yep. And
you just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's a bit of interesting history, actually. I'd like to add a detail that we might bring up in maybe a future space regarding these topics, and it was the Treaty of Versailles. Actually, I've heard it mentioned before. I've got one detail confirmed. It is that Wallenberg was played a huge part in the negotiations for Germany after the First World War. And I've heard it mentioned somewhere that the negotiator, so to speak, for Germany was a Wallenberg, and his son was a negotiator for France. So opposite sides of the table, father and son, tilting the table to their advantage for the upcoming Second World War project with
this is historically,
the bad mustache guy.
Historically 100% correct. This is documented and written down. The protocol from that meeting.
And last year, the Biden administration, 1 week after July 4th, which is allegedly our independence from Britain, put us back into UNESCO. So July 12th, I believe, was the official day that the United States entered into UNESCO agreement.
On that date, John?
Well, it was officially announced.
Around that date?
It was a week later, so it was on the 12th. Was the official date, but yes, rumors have it that it took place going into the 4th.
I feel like they mock us, right? Don't they publicly mock us?
They hate us. They hate America.
They hate us.
No, they hate the concept of non-oligarchy people. That is what they do. You are with the number, you are chattel. You are in maritime law if you don't get out of it.
Well, we're going to rise up, us non-maritime law people, and take our
get your land legs back.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
we are not lost at sea.
That's right. Yeah. We are not lost at sea. Even though I'm a Viking, I am not lost at sea.
Please check out Julian Huxley. The first thing he says when he gets to be the boss of UNESCO is that, we fucked up the Third Reich project. Now it's going to take decades to get it back again. And if you check his history, you will see that Dr. Mengele from the camps, from the Kaiser
Institute,
he is well, let's say it that he's not the core. He's not in the church core, but Julian Huxley is well, he's Belgian actually.
Oh,
He's even
Belgium?
worse. Yeah, he's even worse. He's even worse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, guys. The time.
Yeah. We were,
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Yes,
Next time, guys.
yeah,
of course.
we got
Of
it
course.
flowing again. We that's the way it goes. Money Penny, take all of this information and please come back next time and give your twist on the at least the latest part here. We will continue from the second central bank of the world and how many central banks there were at the First World War. So we will go the First World War and the banking and back it up a little bit. I think for the next space, talking about when the woman got the bank accounts, where did it happen, how did it happen, who were the first, and of course, as we said before, with the numbering of us and so on. We will get back to that. It's pretty important, and also vaccination in large mass. Who was the first? Yeah, we are back to ground zero again at the guinea pigs in Mordor. And with that said, I will crash my banged up old Su-37 straight to the front doors of the Monvik Castle, loaded with really, really stinky Nobel death dynamite. Boom!
Boom.
Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom.
Love you, Mott. Mott is a rock star. We love Mott.
Yes,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Secretary and Tish again, and all the
Thank
speakers.
you,
Appreciate you
everybody.
guys.
Appreciate you
Yeah.
too.
Fantastic. Loved it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. So I'll make sure everybody's on the invite list. Moneypenny, P Grande, Michael. I took photos of who was here, so I'll make sure you're on the invite list. This was wonderful. So hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you Thursday. God bless. Take care, guys.